Well, welcome back to another session. Today I am going to be speaking to a topic that I think might be slightly controversial, and I'd like to begin with some form of a gentle disclaimer. I'd like to say if you are generally triggered, sensitive, not open to a diverse and different set of perspectives, if you're a snowflake, if you cannot think critically, both inductively or deductively, then this session is one that you might want to give a miss and just turn it off and move on. But more importantly, especially if you are a woman. On the other hand, if you can stomach the next few minutes, you don't have to watch. You can simply shut your eyes and listen to the residents speak and hear what I have to say. Today's topic will be about something physical and the physical part of what men generally want and expect. But let me begin, and I should say, I intend to make this into a 4-part or maybe 5-part session, for the reason being that I'd like to break it down into smaller bites so that it's quite easy to digest and to receive, but more importantly because there is much that can be learned and gained from what I have to share, although it might be perceived that I'm speaking to the opposite sex. Let me begin today's session by using an analogy. Many a times I have used several analogies, and cars seem to be one of the closest to human beings. Now, I'd like you to picture this scenario. You're just about to be born. A genie comes to you and says, and let me start by addressing you as Mary. It says, Mary, you are about to be born into the world. You have a great future ahead of you. Things could be incredibly adventurous and successful. And you look at the genie and you smile and you say, you being the wise person you are, what is the catch? If everything potentially could be great, what is the catch? And the genie says, well, there is one small little catch, and that is that for your entire lifetime, you only get one car. And that is the car you're going to have from when you were born until you die. You don't get to change that car, but you get to choose whatever car you might want. Now, I'm certain that Mary would say, considering the fact that she doesn't get to change the car, she would start with a demand for something that she thinks is beautiful, something that she thinks is will last and stand the test of time, something practical, to meet all of her needs, even as she goes through life. Not necessarily a fast car, but a car that can actually be used when she's young, when she becomes an adult, when she gets old. She'll think about all of the requirements of what she might need throughout her life cycle. And let's imagine that she decides on a car that she wants. The next thing I believe will happen is Mary will recognize that she has to look after this car because that's the only car she will get. She would have to clean the car, ensure the right oil is put in the car, ensure the right source of fuel is inserted in the car. She will maintain the car all through her lifetime because that's the only car she gets. Now, the car analogy is something that I imagine you would agree with in terms of what you get to choose, and more importantly, how you get to maintain the car. Now, take that analogy and contrast it with human beings. You and I have been gifted one body. You only get one body. I only get one body. It's for this reason that some of the great wise people from the books of antiquities have come up with different ways of explaining the importance of caring for your body. One great writer says, treat your body like a temple. A temple is something you take good care of, something you look after. First of all, something you put a lot of skill and intention into designing, a lot of expertise into building, a lot of time and attention into maintaining, to ensure that it remains in its optimal state for as long as possible. You get one body, and most of us are not informed at a young age about the importance of caring for our bodies. For some reason, we're slightly negligent as to what we have as a gift. Many of us learn too late about the consequences of our poor decisions. There is a saying that we are too soon old and too late smart. Simply meaning we get smart too late and we get old too fast. By the time we figure out what we've done wrong, it's too late. On the other hand, if you follow the same analogy of the car, one of the things you would normally do is cater for your body as carefully as you would a car. In other words, you would treat your body like a temple, something you care for, something you love. And this will simply mean that what you put into the body will become of priority. Strangely, what I tend to find is that we, for some reason, we do to our bodies everything that we shouldn't. Now, this is not a moral session. Quite frankly, I think people are just as free and just as privileged to do whatever they wish with their bodies. The point being, you only get one. Now, this brings me to today's session and the inspiration for what I think will be about 4 different series. Over the last few months and over the last few days, I have seen more pictures and more articles that have been sent to me about women who are oversized. The latest article was from The Guardian, I believe, or The Telegraph, by a woman who was an overweight woman making a case for the need to normalize the dysfunction of being overweight, which is what I call a dysfunction, something that is not in its right function. And she put a case forward as to why society should embrace women who are oversized, and this is the new normal. Interestingly, the week before, I kept seeing feeds and messages being sent to me, one of which was the Calvin Klein advert, where I think it talked about, I believe, the 1980s, I could be wrong, and it was something similar to a Baywatch photograph with a woman in the right physique, and then there was a woman who was a black woman who was grossly overweight, and then finally, I guess, some trendy sexual preference in terms of theme, which is in vogue these days. But I was struck by the middle photograph, which had a very huge black woman. Now, this is not specific to a particular race, because the same issue applies to all races. But I was struck by the constant, almost choreographed brainwashing that is taking place in society. Now, this was re-emphasized by an experience I had a few days ago watching TV at someone's place, and I noticed. Now, I don't have a television. I don't have a TV set. I haven't had one for a long, long time, decades. And so I don't get to see the change in trends. And so it was a bit of a shock that most of the commercials, what I saw were overweight, fat women. And it felt as though this was being forced down the throats of the consumers and the viewers. A normalization of dysfunction, in my opinion. Now, I say dysfunction simply because if you go back to the 1960s and the 1970s, the average size of a woman in Great Britain was roughly about a size 8. Size 8 was the normal size. Today, the average size is a size 14. Now, what is sad is a size 14 today is not the same as a size 14 in the 1960s. Now, I pointed this out to the missus a few years ago, and she shrugged my comment off to the side. I said that it's been my observation that there's been a dumbing down of female clothes sizes to appeal to the consumer demographics. And she said, what do you mean? I said, when I've met people, or I've listened to women speak, and they say, well, I'm a size 10. In my head, automatically, I say, no, you're a size 14. Sometimes you're a size 16. And they say, no, I don't state my observation or my thoughts, but they talk about the clothes they're wearing. And they say, well, this is a size 8 or a size 10. And I'm thinking, that's not a size 8. You are at least a size 12. You are at least a size 14. And I saw this over a period of time and came to the conclusion that it seemed as though we've started to slowly dilute what used to be a standard, a clothing size standard. And the reason for that is because the average woman has been growing bigger, larger, and larger. It's not the case for men. An anecdotal example is, I know friends and people, and generally I should state that we tend to have friends that are similar to us and have the same similar interests and lifestyles. But I know friends of mine for 15 years who were men who wear the same size of jackets and shirts that they wore when they were still teenagers. For example, I still wear and I still have jackets that I have used for 15 plus years, unchanged. When I walk into the shops, the same jackets, the same sizes will fit me. Now, strangely, about 2 weeks ago, the missus and I went out, and for some reason she decided to try a few clothes in a few shops. So I hung out with the boys and she went out shopping, just looking around. Now she came back and she said, I bought a few clothes, but something strange has happened or is happening. She said, I tried all of my sizes. And based on the size of the clothes, based on what I wear, she says, I tried those sizes that I know are my sizes. And she said, they're just too big. They're literally 2 or 3 sizes above me. So I had to try clothes. There were 2 or 3 sizes beneath me, and they seemed to fit perfectly. So I bought the smaller sizes, and I'll let you see what it looks like. She tried them on a few days later, and I looked at the first size and I said, that is not, the size on the clothes are not consistent with what we've always known, going back in time. So she said, now I think I understand what you mentioned a while back when you said what used to be a size 6 today is now being relabeled, all right, what used to be a size 10, 12 in the past has now been relabeled as a size 6. What used to be a size 16 2 or 3 decades ago has now been relabeled as a size 12. So people are walking around almost with a sense of empowerment, but it's all advertising. And that has simply been the aim of most retailers. Now, I digress. The point of all of this was to say, and to ask a simple question. Cui bono? And that simply means who benefits? I don't believe women are being helped by a lot of the disingenuous messages being put out by people who refuse to pay the price that our forefathers paid. Now, what I find really strange is if you go back and look at your individual family photographs, and you look at your grandmother's photographs, skip your mother's generation. Most likely your mother is a baby boomer or a Gen X, but skip your mother's generation and go to your grandmother's generation. What you find is the women back then, back in the day, they were slim, they were slender, and they looked very good. Now, interestingly as well, they had less education, less resources, less financial support. Most of them worked in the farm, in the garden. Some worked 2-3 jobs, but they looked absolutely gorgeous. The question is, what has changed? We have everything. Women today are more empowered, more educated, more liberated, more free, have more opportunities, but for some strange reason, on the health front, on the physical appearance front, they seem to be doing very poorly in comparison to their grandmothers. Now this brings me to perhaps what I'd like to talk about, which is how does this affect a woman in a man's world? I talked about cui bono in terms of who benefits, and the point being, you do not need me to say that the recipient of all the benefits of maintaining that car, the only car you're going to get, or that buddy, the only buddy you will get is yourself. Better quality of life, extension of your longevity of your life, more opportunities in terms of lifestyle, social connections, relationships, friends, opportunities, adventure, a sense of self-worth, self-image, all possibilities. You benefit as the woman. The person who owns the body benefits. Anyone outside of your physical being gets maybe some remnants of some of those benefits. So for example, if you're healthy, you're generally more happy. You have more levels of dopamine, endorphins, and more levels of serotonin, and certainly more levels of oxytocin from your relationships and your interactions and your lifestyle. But those around you also benefit from the fact that the relationship is more pleasing. There's less complaints. Visually, you're more appealing to look at. And this brings me to what men like, and where men actually play a role. Women generally say that it's not your business, men, to worry about what we look like. Well, I disagree with that characterization. The reason is simple. We're not objects per se, but there's an intrinsic part of us that it can be objective. If you are a consumer, the product you buy is something that is selected by you based on what your preferences are. Similarly, if you imagine men as being products, the consumers are women, and if women are products, the consumers are men. So men have a say We can vote with our wallet or we can vote with our feet. We can simply say, not interested. I don't want to see you. And we can move on. We can swipe left. Now, this simply means that if a woman is not thinking about herself, sometimes one of the ways to be inspired, to be encouraged, to do the right thing is to have accountability from without, which is where the dating and the sexual, or the dating and the marriage marketplace comes in. Now, in some of the sessions that I've done in the past, I have talked about two marketplaces. One is called the dating marketplace, and the other is called the marriage marketplace. People transition usually from one to the other, and sometimes some people decide to just stay in one. The expectations and the requirements of both marketplaces generally vary, but there is a consistent line across both marketplaces, specifically in relation to what men want. So in the dating marketplace, men are visual. We begin with visual. Usually a relationship moves through what I call 7 stages: introduction, conversation and communication. You begin with some level of relationship, and that could be sexual sometimes. You transition from a sexual position to maybe intimacy. Unfortunately, these days, sex often comes before intimacy. So by number 4, you're in intimacy. If it progresses beyond intimacy, then you develop number 5, which is a relationship. The relationship progresses to what I call commitment. Next, number 7, you have dedication. And if things based on both parties progress very, very, very happily, you move into what I call marriage or partnership or civil partnership. So those are the stages of a relationship. But the first stage is conversation and communication. Men generally begin our conversations visually. Women do not like to hear this, but men are visual. We judge you first based on what we see. We are aroused. We have 2 heads, one on the top and one on the bottom. Both heads think independently, but they communicate with each other. Men are visual. A man that has to choose will begin with what you look like, because we have to be excited, aroused, and attracted to you. Now, how do we choose the women that we want to be associated with? Well, generally speaking, in layman's terms, we begin with youth or age. Youth, age, which connects to beauty and attraction. So a man generally thinks beauty, attraction, and youth. Beauty, attraction, and youth. Apologies. Unfortunately, I do not edit my videos, and so take it for what it is. My apologies again. I should have said bless me. I'm sure some people are saying hell no, but bless me in any case. Your beauty, your attractiveness, your youth, which connects to your age, plays a major role. And then we think about your attitude, your personality, etc. Generally speaking, we group all of those into 4 different areas. Your sexual marketplace value, which is your SMV. Your reproductive fertility value, which is your RFV. And finally, your NSMV, non-sexual marketplace value. SMV deals with beauty, your looks, your attractiveness, height, weight, dress size, and all the ratios in relation to your height and your weight. Your RFV primarily deals with your ability to reproduce. And finally, your attitude, personality, femininity, whether you have traditional values and you were raised in the traditional attributes that most women used to have. Those three areas are what we choose by. In the dating marketplace, all we care about is your sexual marketplace value, because men who are in the dating marketplace primarily, we want simply sex. And that means the criteria for sexual arousal is how you look. The fatter you are, the fewer options you have in terms of being attractive to men. Now, there might be some of our rejects that like fat women, or some people who like fetishes. More power to them. But generally speaking, you do yourself a disservice the larger you are. Your RFE deals with your ability to reproduce. Generally speaking, the heavier you are, the more likely when you reproduce, you will retain and grow even larger. So men generally mark you down if you're overweight. Now, I usually talk about two different stages. Your size before the relationship begins and your size during the relationship. Now, if you're already huge before we begin, the only way is up. And therefore, from a man's perspective, he says, well, swipe left. Your non-sexual marketplace value and those attributes you have, and personality traits and personality expressions, and femininity and traditional roles, especially those who live in the typical gender roles, that helps. But men will usually stay if you're attractive. Men usually run or look elsewhere if we're not sexually attracted to you. This simply means that beauty matters. Now, despite what people say, beauty matters. There are some aspects of your beauty that are incidental to who you are: the color of your eyes, sometimes your height, the ratio of your body, generally speaking, in terms of your torso to your limbs. There's nothing you can do about that. You were born with such attributes. But there are some that you have complete control over. Your size, your weight, in many cases, your height to weight ratio, your height to waist ratio, whether you're athletic in terms of physique, whether you maintain an aura, a demeanor, a poise, a mannerism, a decorum. Those are all things that you can create to accentuate your beauty. So having a beautiful face doesn't necessarily make you very, very, very appealing to men, generally speaking. If you have a great body, that can compensate. There's something called the compensation principle. People who are blind have better hearing ability because they have to compensate. People who do not have a very beautiful face have a need. I was raised this way to understand, if you're not beautiful, you have to have a great attitude, you have to have a great and a banging body, because you have to compensate. Now, for some reason, it's been erased to the bottom. People are simply saying, screw it all, let's go for broke. Let's get big, let's get huge. Body positivity has become the norm. Great. For those who like such things, more power to you. Now, let me conclude by simply saying that the point I'm trying to make, and I will elaborate on this in the next session, is that there are choices we make, and the choices we make come with trade-offs. Those trade-offs have consequences. And what is really fascinating is, with those consequences, you also have constraints. So choices, trade-offs, consequences, constraints are inevitable based on the lifestyle you choose. We all get to choose. Now, let me leave you with this slightly thought-provoking statement. Fat women, large women, BBW women, obese women on the aggregate, generally get lower quality men. The larger you are, the fatter you are, the more unattractive you are, the higher the likelihood that the man you will end up with, if you want a man, if, big word, will be a lower quality man. Because men of means, men who have money, power, fame, influence, education, generally speaking, who have created something, are usually drawn to more attractive, smaller, slimmer women. Now, I'll stop that for today, and in the next session, my intention will be to expand on this even more. Now, the next session will be a lot more painful to listen to. However, like I said, if you can receive the information and do a dispassionate analysis of what I'm trying to share, there could be some wisdom keys that could be of use to you. Now, I hope today's session has been useful.